I'll take the other end of the numbers for Bob. If we look at the graduating class of 2012, odds are that 1 in 4 kids who started 4 years earlier did not finish. In some places, it's as much as half the kids did not finish. Every day across this nation, we have somewhere between 45 and 50,000 children drop out of school. Now, what kind of jobs? They're in that 1.2 billion that want the 3 billion that want those jobs, but they think that they can get a job that pays them a living wage without a high school diploma. And it's the frustration I see in teachers' faces all the time as they try to tell the students this. They try to help the parents understand this. So the frustration is there that we have so many kids that are dropping out of our high schools. How many jobs are available to them? Less than 8% of the jobs require less than a high school diploma. That's our projections for 2015. 30% of the kids competing for 8% of the jobs, and the jobs don't even pay a living wage. That's why I can take you to sections of Kentucky and introduce you to a young African male who is between the ages of 18 and 24, and his population and demographic group has an unemployment rate of 50%. Now, what do y'all think is going to happen? This is pretty just common sense, guys. Why do you think education funding has suffered in the last 20 years, really, from a high of 52, 53% in the early days of CARA to now 46% of the state budget? Because the rising increase in Medicaid costs, that's the nightmare that keeps Governor Beshear up every night, I bet, is Medicaid, Medicaid, Medicaid. Who is drawing on those Medicaid? Unemployed, undereducated, and poor health. The other increasing cost is incarceration cost. We are an incarceration nation. I can predict in certain sections of Kentucky that 1 in 4 an African-American male has like a 1 in 4 chance of being incarcerated before 24, and a 1 in 17 chance of going to a 4-year college. These are the challenges that we face. We've done tremendous work in the last 20 years, and I'm optimistic as heck that we're going to do great work together the next 20 years because we have the spirit in Kentucky to get it done. If you don't believe me, just go to West Liberty, Kentucky, and see what the tornado did, and then see what those folks are committed to doing today. We can do this in Kentucky. We can pull the jobs. All you got to do is look around here at what all is happening in Louisville, Kentucky with job growth here, and I'm sure the Lieutenant Governor will talk about that. But we can do this. We can double the number of kids who graduate college and career ready. We can cut the dropout rate in half. We can lower Medicaid costs. We can lower incarceration costs because we believe we can. And we're going to go to work to do it. So I can tell the difference between some of the folks in the room. I can always tell teachers, because you're like me, you're kind of worn out, right? Yeah. It's been a tough year. You guys have really had a job this year, implementing new standards, new assessments, new accountability system. But I just have tremendous faith in you that you're going to make a difference for children in Kentucky. And we're going to address this gap between education and employment on both ends, Bob, both ends.
Thank you, Dr. Holliday. We've got some good questions for you in a second on accountability, I promise you. Well, Lieutenant Governor, you get the enviable position to kind of frame this from a statewide policy perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. I would reference Commissioner's comments regarding corrections and the amount of money of Medicaid, and it reminds me of that old Fram oil commercial. You can either pay for it now or you can pay for it later. And the issue always is focused on trying to pay for it now and to ensure that more and more of our children become assets as they grow up, and less of them become liabilities. Look, folks, our job at the state level in terms of the governor and myself is to carry the message and to assist you all in carrying the message that dropping out of high school just doesn't get it, and graduating high school and only graduating high school is not enough. And we do it over and over again every time I have an opportunity to speak, and using example after example. I don't know if you saw the Lane report last month, but the Lane report laid out an assessment that was made of 41 CEOs around the country. And they were asked, it was a national survey that they reprinted in the Lane report, and they were asked, you know, what's most important? Give me the top 10 things that are important to you in terms of the financial success of your company and where you decide to locate or expand. And of course, most of us always talk about incentives for business, and so we assumed incentives would be right up there. Well, it's just barely made number 10. But number 1 and number 2 and number 3 were all focused on labor, all focused on educated, skilled workforce. And our message as we work with you all throughout the Commonwealth is to carry the very clear bottom line fact that without skills and education, that workforce is not going to grow, economic opportunities are not going to come, and the Commonwealth will not have the kind of vibrant economy that we all want. Now, you know, just as recently as yesterday, I was in Richmond with a Japanese company, and on Monday, I was in Hopkinsville with another Japanese company. Each of them was investing many millions of dollars. Each of them were creating, one was, I think, 50, the other was about 120 new jobs. And both of the folks that were there, through interpreters, said to me, that is the leadership of these Japanese companies, said to me that one of the things, if not the thing, that gave them confidence to expand their existing businesses in these two communities and add jobs was the community college support to be able to ensure them that they would have a productive, educated, skilled workforce. And that comes out over and over again. The ability to be flexible, the ability to ensure that our young people realize that flipping hamburgers that might today give them a chance to be able to buy a car is not enough when they're 30 years old to flip those same hamburgers and think that they're going to be able to provide for their families. It literally creates a situation where you have to stop and you have to think about the kinds of examples that will carry the message to the young people. I always talk about being a police officer. You know, everybody says, oh, yeah, big deal, I'll be a police officer. I've got a high school diploma. No. Louisville, Kentucky, you can't be a police officer without a 2-year associate degree. Well, then I'll just go and take one of these answer service jobs that are growing up all over the Commonwealth. Well, you know, the GE answer service, the one that you see on television where it's Christmas Day and the oven doesn't work and you got trying to figure out who to call to get the oven so the turkey will be ready. And well, that GE answering service is in Kentucky, and they require at least a certificate and prefer an associate degree. So to be able to go and be a cop, or to be able to go and just simply answer a phone and interact with people now requires additional skills. And so our message that we're trying to carry and to support your efforts is to first and foremost ensure that those kids are spending the time necessary to get that high school diploma, but to realize that that's not enough. And that if they're ever going to have a chance to be able to expand their financial wherewithal, they're going to need to have the additional education. You saw statistically just recently they came out and showed that since the year 2002 up till now, the certification, if that's the correct word, the certificates that are given by our community colleges have increased 473%. And those are the kinds of certifications that give an individual an opportunity to get a job. And the hope is that once they receive the certification, they have a chance to continue their education to get that associate degree. But 473% increase in certifications. So the community colleges are so very important. Obviously, the core curriculum in the high schools are important to ensure that we have more and more quality high school graduates who don't need remedial assistance, so that makes college a little less expensive for them. But at the same time, we want to make sure that everybody taking a dual credit with the community college and the high school gets the credit wherever they go. And you guys have been working on that and done a tremendous job rolling out the program yesterday, a software. All of that comes into play to ensure that we can grow the economy of the Commonwealth, because now more than ever before, every economic development decision maker that I visit with wants to know about the skills and the education and the productivity, not only of today as they're investing in a part of Kentucky and creating jobs, but they want to know that 5 years from now and 10 years from now, they'll be able to stay competitive because of what we're doing, what you're doing in education, what we're doing to advocate on your behalf to give those young people the reason to continue their education to ensure that those businesses stay competitive. So that's our sales pitch. That's what we're saying everywhere we go. Every time I have an opportunity to speak to kids, and I go out as best I can to do just that as often as possible, they have got to continue their education, and with your help and with your guidance, and with what these guys are doing up here and their associates in the high schools and colleges around the Commonwealth, we'll be able to deliver that quality of human resource, which is now more important than ever before. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to pose now the how a little bit, and to some degree the what. We've heard the why. So this question, I'll let Bob and Terry decide who wants to go first. When you start thinking about what it means to be college and career ready, what does that mean exactly? And talk a little bit about how Senate Bill 1 may help us to frame and follow through with understanding how to answer that question.
You do. Well, I'm happy to. Senate Bill 1, as Aaron has mentioned and I think Terry has alluded to, is this remarkable piece of legislation that the General Assembly and Governor Beshear signed into law a couple of years ago. And it says, surprisingly for the first time, that there is a recognition that for children coming out of our high schools, earning a high school diploma, and aspiring to go on to college, whether to a community college or a four-year institution, that there needs to be an alignment between what they're learning in high school and what we expect them to know getting to our institutions in order to take credit-generating courses. For reasons that are only the mystery of history, I guess, nobody bothered to think about whether or not any kind of alignment needed to exist. So in simplest terms, and I don't say this with any disrespect, but frankly, we've been teaching kids the wrong stuff. And so when they earn that high school diploma, even with they become the valedictorian and they had a straight 4.0 average and they get to college and all of a sudden discover that they need remediation in math or in language arts. It's not because they got dumb over the summer. It's because the content of the material that was being taught in the public school system until recently didn't really connect at all in any coordinated way with what we expect in college. And so Senate Bill 1 tells us that we need to create that alignment. And so it started with this legislation, but shortly after the legislation was enacted, teams of people from Commissioner Holliday's department, our office, the Professional Standards Board, began meeting to start thinking about, seriously, well, what does this mean and how are we going to do it? And in simplest terms, we got all of the colleges together, including the community colleges, to sit down and agree what is it that youngsters need to know coming in our doors to take a credit-generating course. And once we could establish that across largely the curriculum for general education, these are the courses we expect every student to take, whether they're at a community college or a four-year institution, and then simply worked our way back and said, in order to know this, what do they need to know as seniors, as juniors, as sophomores, as freshmen, all the way down to kindergarten and even eventually to pre-K. And so there has been this remarkable collaboration between our faculty in higher education, the faculty in the K-12 system, to build this alignment. And the standards or the performance that we expect students to meet, at the moment, we use as a very rough measurement the series of ACT exams, the EPASS system. So there's the 8th grade exam, a 10th grade exam, 11th grade exam. We use the 11th grade scores as a rough way of telling us, does this youngster need remediation or not? And we have cut scores in math and language arts and in reading. And so at the moment, that's what constitutes and how we measure college ready. Now that's changing because the new Common Core standards, which I'll let Commissioner Holliday talk about, are now building that foundation that has this alignment, but it will also have with it some new assessment tools, and those new tools will then become the gauge of college readiness. But I'll stop there and let you follow up.
Sure. I always want to take this moment and to honor Kentucky educators because it's phenomenal what you've done in the last 20 years. You rose to the challenge of CARA, and you moved a very low-performing state to at least national average, in many cases beyond. But what we asked you to do the last 20 years was focus on proficiency, and you've done a remarkable job in doing that. But, you know, it's kind of like when I love to play the senior tees, but every once in a while I got a friend that wants to move back to the professional tees. And my score gets hurt a little bit when I move back to the back tees on the golf course. That's what's going to happen to us right now is we're moving from the proficiency tees to the college career readiness tees. Why? We just told you a while ago, the world's changing, demographics are changing, the nature of jobs, the competitiveness of our state and our country depends upon us making this move. So that measure is no longer just proficiency. So we adopted, first in the nation to adopt the Common Core standards, first in the nation that every classroom was teaching those standards this year. First in the nation to assess those standards. Y'all just did that a couple of weeks ago. You had the new test. There are fourth graders all over Kentucky who say, boy, that was hard. I mean, more reading, more comparative, more informational text, more writing for information, math. The kids are saying, whoa, the teacher's even saying, whoa, these are hard problems. And we weren't quite ready for this. So when we start releasing the results of college career readiness, the state board just approved yesterday that from grade 3 to grade 12, every year, that student, that parent, that classroom, that school, everybody will know what percentage of kids are on a path to reach college career readiness, and then what we can do to help them if they're not. Now, the college readiness, we all had, there's only one state in the nation that's done what we've done, and that's applaud to CPE for getting all the 2 years and 4 years to agree on benchmark scores for ACT that any university 2 or 4 year will accept these kids in credit-bearing courses. Now, that doesn't mean they'll get admitted. I mean, there are other factors for admission, but that means they can go right into credit-bearing courses. We don't believe in just putting all our eggs in one test. You can also use Competence, you can also use Coyote, you can also use Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery and Work Keys over on the Career Ready side. We didn't believe that every kid is bound for 4 years. We think lots of kids are bound for certificates and 2 years technical programs. So we really worked on the career ready definition so that when we're out recruiting economically all across this world, not just in this nation. My daughter's interning with Economic Development Cabinet this summer, and she's amazed at how much we're talking to firms in Germany, Japan, France, and the Lieutenant Governor just gave a couple of great examples. So what I want to warn you about is your golf score is going to be a little worse this fall. And I've been trying to tell everybody across Kentucky that the golf score this fall is on college career ready tees, not proficiency tees. So we shouldn't blame educators when we see some pretty significant drops this fall. What we should do is rally around educators to help support them and get them some darn resources in the classroom if we want to have long-term impact on incarceration rates, Medicaid costs, and the economy in Kentucky. We've got to quit going backwards on funding for education. So that's my big message to the General Assembly this year. It's time to buck it up, and good luck, Lieutenant Governor, on that tax commission thing that you got going on.
Aaron, I just want to make just one quick comment. When I said we were teaching the kids the wrong stuff, it was not because our teachers weren't doing what we were telling them to do. We were telling you to do the wrong things because higher educators weren't talking to K-12 educators until recently. And the good news is that with my partner over here, we work more closely together, I think, than leaders of higher ed and K-12 any other state in the country, and people are coming here to learn from us how to do it. The answer is you just call and talk.
And not to let that point go by too lightly, one of the, I think, the strengths of Senate Bill 1, lots of strengths, but to me, one of the largest strengths was that, in fact, structure that allowed the conversation to take place. Not that these guys wouldn't talk to each other anyway, but at least we were charged by our policymakers to make sure it happens. And I'll give both Dr. King and Dr. Holliday their uppins on it, as we would call it in Clay County, by saying that they did come to the table. And in fact, I think we've seen the benefit of that. Lieutenant Governor, I have to tell you, you don't even know this question's coming, but I've seen you operate a little bit, so I'm not worried that you can't answer this question. You know, I'm listening to these guys talk, and I heard the why kinda, but as a kid from the coal mining hills of Kentucky, anybody from Clay County in here, by the way? Any Clay County folk? Okay, you know, I love you, man. That's homeboy. Why is it important to me to do what I need to do at a deeper level? How can you convince me at a policy or a state level that it is important for me? What's my economic value? How can I get beyond the culture thinking that if I did get a job at McDonald's, that could be good enough, or that in fact, still, my argument is that not knowing that even McDonald's will require good education. Talk to me a little bit about that economic policy, that economic development policy, especially as it surrounds itself with having our kids college and career ready in P12 and having them actually get at least the college that they need.
Well, the bottom line is, and by the way, it's good that there's somebody here from Clay County. I don't know if anybody's here from Seneca High School, but if so, hey, there you go. You know, the bottom line is, at this point in time, with technology the way it is around the world, you can do business anywhere. You know, I mean, bottom line, the decision maker who's going to decide whether to expand or whether to bring a business into the Commonwealth can go anywhere. And so what I have found in my many, many years in the economic development field right here in this community is back in 85, 86, everybody wanted to talk about incentives. And in 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, and beyond, they just assumed the incentives. Now the question is, tell me about the quality of life and tell me about the educational opportunities in terms of productivity, skilled, educated workforce. And I also get, and as I said in my earlier comment, they're not so focused on today. They want to be assured that today they're going to find that kind of quality employee, but they want to be sure that 5 and 10 and 15 years from now, with the investment they're going to make, that there's going to ultimately be those kinds of quality, educated, productive, and skilled employees for the future. And what we try to do, and you know, if you go into high schools as I have, where the overwhelming majority of kids are coming from communities and neighborhoods where they're not talking about college, there's no one in their home discussing college. You know, we try to carry that message on a dollar and cents basis. I mean, you can see the statistics, we've all seen them, on the lifetime earning of a person who drops out of high school versus a person who has a high school degree versus a person that goes on for a 2-year and 4-year college. So when you talk millions of dollars to 17 and 18-year-olds and you use that term, over a lifetime, they start thinking like tomorrow, and they say, oh, wow, that's a big difference. So you try to connect in that regard. You also try to make sure that in working with the counselors in the schools, they're carrying that message to the families. And then you have to take it one step further, because it's not enough to just get a kid to understand what I'm saying, that we need him in the economic workplace, that he needs the credentials to be an asset. We've got to make sure that when he or she moves into the community college for a certificate or an associate degree, or shows up at a four-year university and is ready to go because we've got them all fired up and they understand the importance of what they're about, they've got to be ID'd by the universities and the community colleges, because at some point in time when they hit the wall in that first year, and we all did as freshmen, they got nobody to call home to. They've got no connection to be able to give a perspective on it's okay. My kid did it. I did it. I'm sure most of you all did it. So the question becomes, and we did that here in the community when we moved our program that ultimately is now called 55K, but we also got the university presidents and the community college presidents to all sit around and say, once we get them through high school, once they've got the core curriculum to be ready and prepared to go to associate or a college, four-year college, somebody's got to identify those kids so when they do hit that wall as a freshman, they've got a chance to make it through, rather than turning around and going back to flipping hamburgers. And that's the interaction between these two gentlemen and what they represent, because it ultimately creates that chance for, as we sell the idea that if you're ever going to get a quality job, if you're ever going to be able to provide for your family, if you're ever going to be the person who gets up in the morning and is excited about the challenge before him or her, not just going to pull a minimum wage job at McDonald's, then you've got to go on to further your education. Somebody at that community college and somebody at that four-year college has got to ID those kids and be there to be sure they continue to make it through. And so those are the ways that we've approached it. I was thinking about the funding when you threw out the tax code, and thank you very much. Funding's important, folks. I mean, I don't tell you. We take great pride. The governor and should take great pride. He's cut the budget 11 times, cut $1.5 billion out of the budget, but kept the K through 12 funding exactly where it was without cuts. So you say, well, yay, yay, yay. No, not yay, yay, yay. So we cut other departments 30%. We didn't cut K through 12, except we got more kids in school now, by the way, than 4.5 years ago. And oh, by the way, if you haven't checked, there's a recession on, and the recession has an effect to decrease your property values. So when they come to assess the property tax in your counties, the property value is less, so the money coming from the local community is less. So you have less money from the local community, you have more kids in the public schools, and you have the Commonwealth of Kentucky saying how great we are, we're keeping it level. And it is great. It was tough when you're cutting everybody 30%. But the reality is, on a per pupil basis, we're not handling it. We're not carrying the ball. And so one of the interesting things, as you all from around the Commonwealth follow this tax reform issue, is the governor focused on 5 issues to talk about. Keep in mind, we want to be more competitive. We want to be more competitive with our other states around us. Yes. We want the code to be more fair. Yeah, that's important too. We want everybody to pay their fair share. We want it to be easy and simplified and easy to comply with. That's important. We want it to be elastic so that when the economy does better, we have more funds for high schools and community colleges and universities. And the 5th one is we need it to be adequate. Create sufficient funding for the services and needs of the people of Kentucky. And that's early childhood, that's P through 12, that's community colleges, that's universities, that's state police, that's social workers, et cetera, et cetera. So as you go through those issues, that's a little bit more than you had asked. As you follow the evolution and how we're handling that with 23 members of the commission, adequacy is a part. And on our commission, we have, on behalf of the advocacy for universities, we have Dr. Todd, former president of the University of Kentucky. And we also have Stu Silberman, the former superintendent of Lexington, Fayette County, presently the executive director or president of the Pritchard Commission. So there are people on the commission who understand adequacy as relates to education. But the more you can talk to your legislators as time goes by, come next January, February, the better off we'll be. End of advertisement.